Hey, Madison Meeting listeners. We have a really interesting conversation that we want to get into today. We got on this call really wanting to sink our teeth into like a really, really massive topic. And then we got on the call and both of us were like, we're not feeling it today. So we took some time to feel into what's on our hearts, what's on our minds today. And we decided on a topic that I think is going to open up a perspective that perhaps a lot of you may not have really thought about before. And then once we get into it, you might start to recognize that it resonates more than you may have realized. And it is the topic of high involvement, low attachment. And what this can mean or what this can look like is when we go through our lives and there's something that we determine is really important to us. We become very highly involved in creating it, bringing it into fruition, achieving it. And there's a part of us that feels very attached to making sure that we're successful at getting it. And that creates a very large drive energetically coming from a place of need. I will not be okay if I can't create this, if I don't get this, if it doesn't look the way I want it to look. And what started out as something that maybe was very inspiring for you, and that's coming from this really genuine, open-hearted place, can start to feel very icky as the need for this thing grows inside of you. And it becomes a little bit alarming to think about it not working out. And so learning how to approach desires inside of your life from this place of high involvement where you're really enjoying the process, but having a low attachment to any particular outcome, meaning if it doesn't go the way I want it to go or anticipate it going, I will be okay, can be a very freeing place to operate inside of. And learning how to move from a place of, I need this to work out, to a place of surrendering into what comes will come is a tough process, but can open you up to a whole new experience inside of yourself and your life. So that's what we're planning on talking about today. And we
Yeah.
both have I guess like personal experiences with this that we'd like to discuss and talking about it from a coach's perspective too. And I think that there's going to be a lot to explore inside of it.
Yeah. Well, when I first heard about this terminology of high involvement, low attachment, I think I heard about it in one of Michael Neal's books or something like that. And it was around the time where I was also learning and integrating this concept of acceptance in a bigger way. I was taking a coaching certification course that Amanda has also taken as well. And acceptance is a really big part of the entire coaching model that's taught inside of that certification. And so I was learning kind of how to intellectually understand what acceptance is and why it was important, and kind of hearing from the perspective of the certification of like why that is involved into this methodology that makes it so much better and makes it work in the way that it does compared to the typical approach that we have to changing ourselves or changing our lives or transformation, etc. And this idea of acceptance, it feels very interchangeable as well with terms I'm sure we're going to come up in this conversation, like surrender. And that really feels relevant to this conversation of high involvement, low attachment, because to me, how I conceptualize that, at least in my mind, is that what we're really referencing here is our outer experience or our outer operating system and our inner experience or our inner operating system. And so when we take the first half of that concept, high involvement, to me, what that really means is how are we being involved outwardly? Like, what behaviors are we doing? What actions are we taking? Like, how are we outwardly aligning ourselves with this outcome, this goal, this change that feels really meaningful and important to us? And then the second half of that concept, which is low attachment, is referencing what is our inner relationship with what's happening externally? What is our inner relationship with the behaviors and the actions that we're taking? What is our inner relationship with the outcomes and the results that are and are not happening? And it comes back to this model that I remember creating in my head very early on when I was learning about this idea of acceptance, because a lot of the time we have resistance to this idea of acceptance, especially when, like, for me, it started with goals around like changing our body, right? We always reference back that that's where I started in this work, is coming from a fitness and nutrition coaching background. The idea of weaving in the concept of acceptance into the work of someone who's wanting to change their body, to feel more confident, to get healthier, to work on their nutrition and fitness, etc., had this undertone of resistance because there's this assumption that acceptance equals complacency in a way. So, as an example, if I were to accept where I'm at now, then I wouldn't take action or I wouldn't go to the gym. I would make excuses for eating something that isn't in alignment with the ultimately how I want to be feeling and looking and fueling myself. It would be an excuse for me to veg out on the couch instead of moving my body and doing something that's good for me. And so, this idea of acceptance equals complacency, I've conceptualized in this form of like a graph where it's like, okay, what we're talking about here, acceptance and complacency, is again dealing with those two different aspects. There's the outer experience, which in this case is the complacency. It's, what am I doing outside? I'm not doing anything. I'm staying complacent. I'm staying stuck. I'm not taking any forward action. And then what is the inner experience that I'm talking about here, or referencing in acceptance equals complacency? Well, acceptance is like, I'm okay with it. Acceptance is surrender. Acceptance is kind of that low attachment, like almost like not caring in a way what's happening, not being attached to any which way or the other. And so that is an experience that I think we very commonly pair together. Like, if I am accepting, if I'm okay, if I don't care what happens, then that means I'm not going to take action. But that's not necessarily the case because there are lots of different combinations that we can make of the inner and outer world that we can come up with lots of examples for. For example, if we take this same concept of complacency, which is dealing with the outer experience, you not taking action, you staying complacent, you staying stuck on whatever goal it is. We're referencing being healthy, or we're referencing starting a business, or we're referencing whatever. Then we could take that same outer experience and also pair it with the opposite of acceptance, which would be non-acceptance, judgment, resistance, attachment, right? And how many people are in this state where they are so not okay with where they are? And they're so not okay with them staying where they are. Like, they're miserable. They don't feel good about themselves. They don't feel good about their lives. They're constantly in resistance and judgment of where they are and who they are currently, and they're not doing anything about it. That's a very common experience that I have had, you have had. So many of the people that we've ever worked with have been or come to us usually in that place. And so, if you compare the outer concept of complacency with, you're either going to accept it and feel okay with it, or you're going to not accept it and not be okay with it, then we can also do the same in reverse. We can take that idea of acceptance, of having low attachment, of just not caring so much about what happens, etc., like just being kind of at peace with what is, and not being complacent. You can pair being in acceptance or being in low attachment with also taking action. which is really what this idea of high involvement, low attachment is really referencing, is how can we be out there in the world doing things, taking aligned action, like really moving in ways that feel in integrity with who and how we want to be in the world, while not being so miserably and stressfully attached to what happens as a result of that action.
May I put forward an idea? I don't
Of
know how it's going
course.
to sound when it comes out of my mouth, but I've been contemplating it as you've been talking. What we fear of the concept of high involvement, low attachment is complacency, where if I detach from the need for the outcome, then I'll become complacent. But can I argue that complacency is birthed from high involvement, high attachment?
That too. That's a good point. I've
Be-
been there.
because when you're so attached to a specific outcome not working out for you, it can throw you into a place of um, im- im- like when you're paralyzed
Yes. Or
and
exhausted.
right. And so the ability to find pleasure inside of the process actually frees you from complacency. If your go-to tends to be avoidance when you're afraid.
Mhm. Yeah. I can literally think of experiences in my life where I have been in that state of high involvement, high attachment, when it was like I was doing so much, fueled solely by the terror that I felt
Yeah,
of not getting to some outcome or staying where I was. Like what was fueling all of this nonstop, obsessive in a way, action towards something was my attachment to needing to escape where I was
right,
ultimately. And those times in my life, when I think back at them, I mostly just feel really sad
right.
because I was ultimately really miserable during those times in my life.
Over the course of the last 5/37 years,
Somewhere in between there.
the 37 years leading up to the last 5 years of deep reflection and contemplation, I have really come to this place of if you're not having fun, then what's the point? And I'm speaking to someone that doesn't have very many financial responsibilities. And for that, I take complete accountability with what I'm about to say. I'm not saying throw it all away and just live on a beach. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is accessing peace inside of my existence has become my main priority because otherwise, quite honestly, what's the point? And it's taken me the last 5 years of entrepreneurship, of constantly operating out of a place of high involvement, high attachment. If this doesn't work out for me, then I'm a loser. I'm
Mhm.
a failure and I'm going to have to go back to a job that I don't want. And fighting against that reality for so long that it got to a place of like, well, I'm miserable here and I'm avoiding being miserable there. And at the end of the day, I'm miserable. For me to be able to access this place of high involvement, low attachment, which I feel like I've accessed quite recently, at least the most I've accessed, been able to access it. And I have found myself operating inside of my business in a new creation that I'm embarking inside of from a very different place energetically. which has allowed me to access a, a way of being that I didn't know was possible, where I could literally sit down and pour my heart into something, knowing that I was just going to put it out there into the world, and that was enough.
Mm.
And I've never felt that way before. Even as a little kid, when I would make things in art class, it had to be good. And I would be
Yeah.
so hard on myself if it wasn't. And having this perspective of reincarnation, and if this is not something you resonate with, I totally understand. But this is just coming from my perspective. Like if I'm here to just enjoy the human experience, then why am I making such a big deal out of it?
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't feel like the stakes are high enough anymore for me
Yeah.
to care enough.
That's a good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there are so many experiences that lead to people having or reaching that point where it's like, oh yeah, like the stakes of me staying in this high attachment place where I'm constantly trying to escape where I am and get somewhere else because of these stories that I have about what it's going to mean about me if I don't get to this other place than where I currently am. The stakes of staying in that experience and mode of operating is that I am probably like the best case scenario is that I'm going to get there. And like that, and that doesn't even feel that exciting once you
Right?
reach that point.
When
It's
you
like the
really
best
sit,
case scenario is I'm going to have a successful business. The worst case scenario is I won't have it. I'm going to be miserable. I'm probably going to make myself sick. Like, I'm not going to be happy. I'm going to feel like I had wasted all of this time pouring my energy into something that didn't work, where I could have been pouring my energy into things that gave me more of a in the moment happiness and peace.
let's use the theoretical example of the business just to go with this analogy. If you're building your business from a place of high involvement, high attachment, I have to make sure this works. Because if this doesn't work, I'm a loser, I'm a failure, and then I'm going to have to go back to a job I hate. And you're successful at whatever that means. Let's say, let's define success as you're making six figures inside of your business and you have all these clients. The pressure of maintaining that, right?
True.
Would you be able to finally exhale at any point in time and be like, I made it? Or would you be in this constant, like, hamster wheel of, and I have to make sure I still don't fail. And I have to make sure it all doesn't crumble in front of my face. And I have to make sure all my clients are happy. And I've reached six figures, but I can't stop there. Now I need to do, 250,000 or seven figures. And like that same energy of high involvement, high attachment doesn't go away. It's just
Yes.
projected onto the next thing. And so you're
Yeah.
stuck inside of it forever.
Yeah. This feels like a pretty bold statement, and I'm not sure how accurate it really is, but it almost seems like the only way to release attachment is to face the reality that you won't get what you're attached to.
Yes.
Because if you continue to work towards having that thing that you're attached to having, the attachment will never go away. It's always going to be there. Like you said, you'll hit the $100,000 and now you're going to be attached to never going below $100,000. You're going to be attached to never disappointing someone. You're going to be attached to making it to $250,000 now or getting to seven figures or whatever scaling or whatever. Like there's going to be an attachment that keeps you married to this really stressful world that you're never going to be able to escape until, like I said, you face the reality of not having the thing that you're attached to. And maybe facing the reality doesn't necessarily have to mean you face it in the physical world. And what I mean by that is, I don't think you necessarily have to go broke in order to release your attachment to being financially secure. But you have to find it within yourself that it would be okay if you were.
I think that the mind is extremely powerful. And I
Hmm.
think that this is where all of our conversations about embodiment work really come in, where it's possible to sit and visualize your worst case scenario. Because when you're experiencing it inside of your mind, to your nervous system, it's happening for real.
Right.
And it's possible to sit inside of a mental reality and feel the effect of that and move through it somatically
Hmm.
so that the discomfort inside of that physical experience is not driving the fear in the physical world.
Yes. Yeah. I remember one of the most profound experiences of doing that work I had. And it was actually under the guidance of our mutual friend, Laura. She suggested that I do this. And I was like, oh, you're right. I should do this because it was at a point in my life and business where I was feeling really, 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 really attached to my business succeeding, or ultimately my business not failing. And I was in this phase of like, clients are coming in really slowly, like other clients are ending their contracts with me, like not really knowing what my income is going to be next month, like, and just feeling like at any point the shoe was going to drop. And I didn't know if in a few months I was even going to have a business. I had no way of even projecting whether like I had that level of security inside of my career. And it was at the point where it was keeping me up at night constantly. Like it was everything that I could think about. It was bringing up so much fear in my body. And ultimately it was that attachment. And so what I did was I literally like set a 30-minute timer on my phone. And I'm like, I am going to sit on this couch and to the best of my ability, visualize not having a business anymore. Like visualize never having signed another client again. Visualize like just what is that gonna mean, really? Like what is my life actually going to look like if that becomes my reality? Rather than staying floating on top of the surface of that and being like, it seems like it's getting there, but I have to make sure it doesn't happen. And I'm going to work hard and I'm going to stay up later and I'm going to do more and I'm going to hire more people and I'm going to like do everything that I can to make sure that I never get there. It was actually inviting in the experience of it, but in my present moment. And it was really interesting where my mind went, and it happened very quickly. I was actually surprised at how immediately I dropped into this overwhelming sense of peace.
Yes. It's like it moves through you and then it's gone and you're like,
Yeah,
where'd it go?
exactly. It was like as soon as I made it okay
Yeah.
that that could happen, immediately I was like relieved. Like there was this fight or this battle that I was gripping for so hard in my body and in my mind. And then as soon as I was like, well, what if it does just happen? It was like, oh, like that fight can end now. That war inside of myself, that war with that potential reality completely ended. And then my mind started taking it to another notch where it was like, oh, that means that we could do that whole thing where like you volunteer at hostels and you travel the world and like you don't have to work anymore. So you can just like volunteer at a hostel and live on a beach and like get no money, but also get free food and like have free accommodation and just like wake up every day and work a couple of hours and meet new people every day. And it was like this weird, ex like, I was like, oh, I actually kind of want that more than I want the successful business
I'm so glad that we're going here. So this actually segues into a conversation around manifestation.
now.
The very idea of manifestation is high involvement, low attachment. That's what it is.
Yeah, true.
When we desire something, it's always coming from our ego part. Like, because it's our conscious mind that's making up the notion that this thing that we tell ourselves we want is going to give us access to a feeling that we believe we don't currently have access to. So we attach onto it. If I get this thing, I'm safe, I'm saved, I can escape my current reality. But as soon as you attach onto this thing that you're desiring to manifest, you're automatically, energetically going into a place of need. I need this and I can't be okay without of it. And you're closing yourself off from an open energy.
Yeah.
And it's the open energy of surrender, what will be, I'm at peace regardless, that actually prevents you from accessing uh, an outcome that's going to facilitate more of that.
Right.
And that's what
Yeah.
that's exactly what you just said, is that the
Mhm.
idea of something better than your conscious mind could have created would
Yeah.
dropped in when you let go.
That's right. Yeah, it was like a receptive energy, that openness that you're describing, where it's like the outcome is okay regardless. I am safe and I'm okay regardless. Like that allowance and that surrender is in integrity with just receiving. Like there's I'm sure we talked about this in other episodes, but like this I think this was even one of our first episodes where we talk about like what it is that we want versus like what we think that we want with versus what we actually want. And what we think that we want is just so silly because it's like, how could I actually know what I want when I'm limited by like the past, when I'm limited by like my ego? Like there's so much that constricts my perception of what it is that I want because I was so attached to, like using my example, I was so attached to, I need to have a successful online coaching business. That's what I want. There's nothing better than that. And I could argue all day of which one is actually better, like making no money and living on a beach in a hostel for free accommodation and food, or having a successful online coaching business. Both of them could be good for their own reasons, right? But it was so interesting to have like, it wasn't just in my mind, it was like this spark of excitement that I got in my body of just like, oh, that sounds amazing to just like wake up every day, have no responsibilities other than to like stand at a hostel reception desk and like meet new people and like fold some towels and like know that I have a bed to lay in every night and know that I'm going to get food and know that I'm going to have time to like hang out with meet new people and go to the beach and like hang out with the beach dogs and like the hostel cats
Yeah.
and all of that. Like that sounded so exciting to me, but it wasn't until I, like you said, dropped that attachment, that need to have this thing that I decided I'm supposed to want, that I saw this other thing that was at least equally as desirable in its own unique way. That was exciting.
I don't know where I'm about to go with what you're going to say, but I'm hoping I'll
I
figure
love
it out
that.
along the way. The thing that gets me caught up with the manifestation conversation is that we tend to have an idea of something that feels really expansive to us. And we believe that getting it will allow us to access more of that feeling. But things don't carry energy unless you project whatever you're deeming it to, like, things are neutral, and the way we perceive them give them that perspective. And so when you're imagining your best case scenario, that scenario is your best case scenario because you're believing it to be that way. It's not just inherently that. And so your conscious mind has no way of knowing what is for your highest and best and what is your like most magical potential. And so all you can really do is imagine your best case scenario and then allow the universe to put things on your path that will guide you to somewhere even better. And
Mhm.
to have a low attachment to that thing that your conscious mind is telling you your best case scenario allows you to be open enough to see the breadcrumbs in front of you where you would be so narrowly focused otherwise that you might not even realize that they're there because you're so preoccupied with this other thing. And that was me for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm about to go somewhere with this that I don't even know where it's leading. But what I find really interesting about this conversation, just on a you and me note, but I'll try to weave in so other people that are listening understand what we're talking about. We had like so many different ideas of topics that we were going to talk about today, and each one we were like, I don't know about that one. I don't know about that one. And then we landed on this idea of high involvement, low attachment. One of the topics we were going to tackle today is manifestation. So it's interesting that we're weaving this into it. But
Yeah.
another conversation that we were going to have is this idea of like having an external goal versus like what is it that what's the deeper desire behind that external goal? And I think that's really relevant to what you're saying, Amanda, because when we take this practice of manifestation and we're trying to create something different in our lives or something specific in our lives, the attachment comes in when we are looking at the thing that we want as an external outcome, like having a certain amount of money or having the business or whatever. And so one very like tangible strategy of coming away from attachment is actually getting clear on, well, what does that thing that I'm saying I want externally actually represent? What is the deeper desire behind that? Because if I can get clear that what I actually want isn't the successful online coaching business, but it's the freedom, the security, the feeling significant, the being proud of myself, feeling empowered, feeling independent, feeling like I can do anything. Like, if that's what I want, can I channel that energy as what I want and then allow what that looks like on the outside to be a creative byproduct of whatever the universe wants to make it? Because it might be an online coaching business or whatever, but it could also be something that your conscious mind and ego can't conceptualize because it's never seen it before.
I had to reach that through a lot of failure.
Yeah.
I I had to operate from this place of I need my business to work for me, otherwise I can't be happy. And then it have not gone my way enough times for me to really sit and visualize, okay, let's say I just walked away and like really strongly debated doing that and took the action actually to do that recently, where I started to imagine what my life would look like if I did walk away. And I
Mhm.
felt this immense freedom.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize how trapped my business made me feel until I allowed myself to walk away from it.
Right.
And that's when I realized, oh, it's not my business that's giving me access to these feelings that I've been searching for through it all along. I can feel completely at ease inside of my life, regardless of what I do, as long as I'm satisfied inside of who I am and feeling a sense of connection to people in every day. And if I'm just channeling for my own enjoyment, I mean, isn't that what it's for in the first place?
That's right.
And I really do feel like ultimately that's what we're all seeking is this feeling of just inner freedom and inner peace. And when you can finally realize that the external world cannot give that to you,
Mhm.
it can't, then you become free
Yeah.
and you can operate inside of any aspect of your life with a degree of unattachment. And you're going to fall back here and there into, no, I need this thing.
Yeah.
And sometimes having it ripped away from you is the only way to re-access that freedom that you were seeking in the first place.
I have my own recent discovery of what you're talking about recently that I want to expand on because it's coming to mind as you're talking, and I think it's an interesting angle to it too. Because alongside my business representing this feeling of freedom and inner peace, like that being something that I was seeking through having better success in my business, absolutely true. And a big part of it that feels even more relevant to me is this feeling of being significant or important or special in a way. There was always this like, ooh, like this deep ego hit, like this dopamine hit that I got every time that I would tell someone that I'm self-employed or that I have my own business. And like just the pride that would wash over me to be able to say that I'm that type of person or to say that like when I meet someone while I was traveling at first and like they're like, "Oh, like are you traveling for, a couple of weeks?" And like, "Oh no, I'm doing this indefinitely because I work online so I can be here as long as I want." Like there was just this huge like that I got from that. And I watched as, as business ebbs and flows and I got into a low hit in my business or any time that the attachment to my business being successful and not failing started to become heavier and heavier, then the fear of losing that was so potent. The fear of not having this thing that gave me this sense of being significant and special and validated was so terrifying. Like I remember even sitting with myself and being like, what would be the worst part of this, really? Is it that I would have to go get another job? That would suck, but maybe not. Is it that I wouldn't make as much money doing a regular job as I could make as a person, like as an online coach? Maybe, but also I haven't made that much money as an online coach, so maybe I would make more. I don't know. Like I could argue with myself. Is it the security? Is it the peace? Is it the freedom? And the main thing was I wouldn't feel special.
Yeah.
I wouldn't feel significant. And there's been an interesting shift in this very recently as I've created a life for myself in this new city that I've moved to in Australia. And as I've been here, I've developed so many different relationships and connections and just have made so many friends and acquaintances. And so many of those people don't know me as someone that has like an online business or whatever, don't know me as someone that works for herself because as I've been here in Australia, I have picked up a second job. I'm working at a bingo, which is really funny. Side note. And so when people ask me like because I'm here on a working holiday visa, so you do have to get a job in Australia in order to maintain that visa. And so people are like, well, what do you do for work? And rather than saying, oh, I'm self-employed, I run this online coaching business and blah, 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 and it's about body image and I love it and it's my passion and blah, 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 like just like trying to get that ego hit from it. I'm like, oh, I'm working at this place called Kazali's. I am a bingo caller. And to just have that be my thing that I go to and to allow people to know me as that and to experience me without this thing that I thought was what made me so special and important has gifted me so much. One is just like having to face that thing that felt really big of like, who am I without this identity anymore? Right. But also like still feeling accepted, still feeling special, still feeling significant, still feeling validated, still feeling like desired by the people around me where they still want to, have relationship with me. They still want to hang out with me. They still see me as someone that they value the presence of in their life, even though I'm not this thing that I've decided is what makes me special.
When they tell you what they do for a living, does that even cross your mind? How, do you
No,
do you gauge how special they are?
not at all.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
That because that comes across my mind all the time, where it's like someone asks me what I do for a living, and then I have to figure out in a split second what the hell to say.
Right.
And now is the added weirdness of when as soon as I tell them what I do, it's going to call up an existential question. They're going to have to think about the entire reality of their existence. And because of what I do for a living, might bring up a lot of questions. I have felt sort of like this weird feeling of insecurity as well when that comes up, where it's like, well, now all of these weird questions are going to come up in terms of my legitimacy and you do what? Like, is that a real thing? Like, you know what I mean? Like
Sure.
all of those assumptions that might be running through their head. And I was so attached to my business being successful because if I could say, well, I mean, I make six figures,
Right.
immediately I know that regardless of what their original opinion was about me, well, now I've just completely legitimized it.
Right.
And learning how okay it is if I get a client that is not happy with the service, or if someone shows up for an event and it just wasn't for them, that was my worst fear.
Fear. Yeah. Yeah. Same.
And I would drive myself insane making sure that the events and the experiences would be perfect
Hmm.
to avoid that. And then I was pushed my guides were like, oh, you're just going to channel everything. And I was literally ripped away from the ability to ensure anything because I
Yes.
have no idea what's going to happen.
There's no
And
pre-planning.
I can't pre-plan it and I can't ensure that
Yeah.
anybody is going to be comfortable and that they're going to walk away
Yeah.
happy.
Which you couldn't do before anyway, but at least you could do something that allowed you the illusion to think that you were in control of it.
Right. But it's interesting when you're forced into this place of detachment
Yeah.
how you suddenly find a semblance of freedom inside of that where you perhaps were struggling to access it before. And now when I have to plan for something, it's like, ugh, just want to channel the whole thing so that I don't have to pre-plan. And so now I
Right.
feel more comfortable
That
being
becomes the
just
norm.
right.
Yeah.
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 Um,
There's been a lot of experiences of that for me, like even having this second job that I'm doing. It's like that was like the worst thing in the world. Ask me 18 months ago that I should like if I should maybe get like a second job to support myself while I grow my business. I would have been so triggered. Like I would have been like, no, I can't do that because it would have represented like that means I'm failing. That means I'm not going to have the freedom anymore. That means that I'm not going to have all of this time to dedicate to growing my business. So inevitably it's going to fail. And then like I would have just had every excuse under the sun not to do that because it was terrifying to me. And ultimately, I think it was mostly terrifying because of the story I made that mean about me. Like if I got a second job, that meant, well, I'm failing as a business owner, or that means that I'm not really doing that well, or that means that like I'm not significant or special in some way that for whatever reason is really important to me. Um, but
I
now that
mean,
I have it, I'm like, this is great. Like
that's
I love it.
essentially what's driving all of this is the stories we tell
Yes,
ourselves about who we believe
always.
ourselves to be and who we desire to be instead.
That's right.
That's what this
Yeah,
comes down to.
that's right.
And ultimately, that's all your existence is, the stories you tell
Hmm.
yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's been like, this shift from, let me just start by saying, like, I recognize that for whatever reason, there is this deep, deep need to be special for me. And I see it everywhere. Like, I think that talking about the Enneagram, like, I'm very strong in the Enneagram 4. Like, I want to be special and significant and unique and different, but like in a good way,
Oh, I thought
in
you
a
were a
way that's
nine.
loved. No,
What
definitely not a
are
nine.
you four wing two or wing, sorry, four wing five, four wing three? Are
I
you a four
oscillate.
wing three?
I probably, I don't,
I'm a
I
three
don't
wing
know.
four.
Wait, let's just talk about the Enneagram all day. I like
We'll
that
do that next
conversation.
time. If you don't know
Yeah.
the Enneagram, maybe quickly describe what this is. It's a way of like kind of like a personality test.
Yes, it's a personality archetype system based on 1 to 9 different types that utilizes, or it's based on what is your core desire or core driver in life, and then what is your core fear that also drives you in life. And each of the 9 types have a different core desire and fear. I'm like an Enneagram 6 and an Enneagram 4, depending on the day. Like I'm very high in both. And I think like my inner operating system is more 4. I just don't present as a 4 because 4s are known as being like big funky earrings and glasses and like being very eccentric externally, which I don't think I necessarily am that way, but I think in just that deep desire to be special and unique and loved in that, and then a deep fear of being insignificant, which is the cores of the 4. That's what drives me in life, I think, more than anything.
I think there are a lot of us out there like that.
Yeah, I am so heavily driven by this desire to be special, to be significant. And as I've started to at least create the understanding of that in myself and also seen like how did I create that for myself? How did I try to create this feeling of being special? It was through being a business owner. It was through having this cool business. It was through being successful. It was through traveling indefinitely. It was through like at one point when I was a personal trainer and nutrition, it was through having this body that people looked up to. Like there's all of these different strategies that I use to try to fulfill this deep longing to be special. And recently, as I've like either been forced to or have chosen to let go of pretty much all of those things in some way, shape, or form that had allowed me to justify my specialness, I've started to just feel into what's actually true about who I am, because all of those things weren't who I am if they could go away. Like they were, like I was never a coach because coach could go away and I'd still exist type of thing. Or I was never the body because the body could go away and I'd still exist. So I was starting to see, well, like, who am I actually beyond all of these external things that I use to justify my specialness and my significance? And then knowing who I actually am and seeing the specialness of that and just like really allowing that to be embodied. And again, in these new friendships and connections and relationships that I'm building here in this new city that are based on nothing really that I ever thought made me significant. Like they're not knowing me as Kelly, the personal trainer with the body. They're not knowing me as Kelly, this really successful online entrepreneur or whatever. They're knowing me as like this girl that just like rocked up one day at this like sunshine or sunrise meetup and just like was thrilled to meet everyone and engaged in conversation and has this really eccentric loud laugh that I can't control, but I just do constantly.
I'm so glad we're talking about this. I think that we all deep down have this desire to feel special, but we make that wrong.
Hmm.
I do that. I'm a three
See,
wing
yeah,
four. It's very important for me to feel significant and special on both sides of the equation, my 3 and in my 4.
yep,
And that's very strong for me. I think it's very strong for a lot of people in the spiritual space. I think the spiritual space feeds off of that. We could
yeah,
talk about that in a different conversation.
yep,
But I think that because we want to feel special so badly, it's coming from a place of not inherently feeling that way. And we're afraid that
that's
we're
right.
not special.
That's
And
right.
when you can anchor into what makes you special is you, not what you do, not what you say, not how you show up in the world. It is literally you. When you
Yeah,
can ground into that, then you stop looking outside of you to fulfill that need because that need has
that's right.
already been fulfilled. There was never anything not special. So it's not that it's wrong to want to be special. It's normal. It's actually a reflection of what's true, which is that you are.
Right. Thank you for saying that because there's been a lot of work I've had to do on unrejecting my desire to be special because I think I saw it as arrogant
Yes,
for a long time. Like I wanted to be special, but I didn't want people to know that I wanted to be special. So there was like
exactly.
this weird like trying to blend in, but in a way that like still really stood out to people.
Exactly. You want people to think you're special, but you don't want to think you're special.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
You don't want to come across as you thinking you're special, but you want everyone else to think you're special. So like you are
Right.
special, but
You
you're just
don't, yeah,
humble
right.
inside of your
Just humble.
specialness.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. And there's been so much goodness that has just come from me really owning that, like, I love feeling special. Like, I love it. I love that, like, my friends come to me for certain things. Like they think of me, specifically me, for whatever reason about something. That makes me high. Like
Yeah.
I love hearing that, like, having contact with someone that I met randomly, like at a hostel while traveling. They're like, "Oh, I thought of you the other day, and it made me think of like when we did this." And I'm like, "Yeah, like I made an impression on your life." Like I love that so much. And like, how cute is that? Like, that's not wrong to love and enjoy that.
If you
That's
in
just so sweet.
if you inherently believe that you're special, is it easier to ground into high involvement, low attachment?
Yeah, because if you were attached to external things happening as your strategy of feeling special, because of the story you told yourself about this makes me special, or if I fail at this, or if I don't get this, or if I stay where I'm at, that means I'm not. If you just know that you are, regardless of what happens externally, regardless of if you get the thing, you don't get the thing, you stay where you are, etc., like there's still something about you that is special and lovable and just unique and significant and important and purposeful, then it's like, okay, well, I might have wanted that thing and it might still hurt and suck to not have it, but it doesn't, the attachment isn't there. There might just be a little bit of, oh, okay, like disappointment in a way, but it's not as hard hitting.
Right. Is there anything that you want to say to tie this up today? This journey that we took everyone on?
Where we wove in literally every conversation topic that we came up with into
Yeah.
one by
Yeah.
accident.
But I think it's a very interesting analysis of where we put our
Yeah.
energy.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me ask you as a roundabout way of just simply like, if someone recognizes now through listening to this conversation the importance of moving into a place of high involvement, low attachment, what is the first thing that's required or that they could do or could look at in order to move towards that place?
I think identifying what it is that they're really attached to.
Yeah,
What is it that they're seeking? And what is it
right.
they're afraid of losing?
And that comes
And
to
that,
the story. Again, the
and
story you tell
yeah,
yourself about yourself.
recognizing that the attachment is a fear of the story of who you believe yourself to be and who you would be as a byproduct of the outcome not going your way. And then finding safety inside of that potential and to see the dissonance inside of that story, that that story is not really true. And that whatever it is you're searching for inside of the outcome that you're attaching to can be found in the here and now, and that it's not needed.
Mm,
And to be open to receiving whatever it is you're looking for, however it's meant to come to you, knowing that if it never comes, you never needed it in the first place.
yes. Mic drop. Thank you for that. And that's on that.
Thank you, everybody, so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.